What does the Bible say we should do when somebody hurts us? In Exodus, it says this: But if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. However, in Matthew, Jesus tells us this: You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. While this seems like a contradiction, three things are going to show us that these verses are actually part of the same story and there's no contradiction here. First, eye for an eye doesn't mean what you think it means. Today, we use that phrase to mean revenge. Like, if you hurt my eye, I'm going to hurt your eye back. But the problem is that's not what the Bible means when it uses this phrase. A better way to understand this phrase would be to say only an eye for an eye. The purpose of eye for an eye is to limit revenge, not to encourage it. Let's pretend, for example, that there's a government that has a law that says if you steal an apple, we're going to cut off your hands. I think most people would agree that that's not fair. But the real question is, why isn't that punishment fair? And the answer is that the punishment is way worse than the crime. Yes, stealing an apple is bad, but cutting off somebody's hands is way too extreme for that sort of a crime. Maybe they should pay a fine or do a little community service, but that person definitely shouldn't have their hands cut off for stealing an apple. That's the idea behind eye for an eye. The punishment needs to match the crime. It can't be worse. So again, a better way to understand that would be only an eye for an eye. The second thing we need to understand is that this advice is for legal situations, not relationships. Eye for an eye is given as instructions only 3 times in the Bible, and each case it's given in a legal situation. The first reference to eye for an eye is in Exodus 21, and it has to do with men being in a fight and a pregnant woman getting hurt, which is a specific legal context and how the punishment should be applied. The second reference is in Leviticus 24, which has to do with personal injury. And the last reference is in Deuteronomy 19, that has to do with instructions dealing with false witnesses. And this difference between legal situations and relationships is really important because in both the Old and the New Testament, God tells us that the government has a special job to punish evil and bring about justice, even though the government doesn't do this perfectly. During the Israelite time, if a situation went through the law, it would involve a judge, it would involve witnesses. There was a process in which this all went to that would help to make sure that the punishment was fair. This is different from a personal relationship and me just deciding to take matters in my own hand and get revenge. That is not what eye for an eye means. When it comes to our relationships with people, the Old Testament and the New Testament are clear that we need to love and forgive others and not look for revenge. For example, in Leviticus 19, we read this: You shall not take revenge or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Or in Proverbs chapter 20, where we read this: Do not say, I will repay evil. Wait for the Lord, and he will deliver you. So even in the Old Testament, it's clear that in our relationships, we need to love other people and not look for revenge. Eye for an eye is a limit on legal punishments. It's not permission to look for revenge in our relationships. Then we come to our last point, which is that Jesus raises the bar even higher. In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus tells us that he came to fulfill the law, and he takes the Old Testament law and raises us to a higher standard. Instead of just looking at the legal sense of the law, he looks at the heart behind the law. For instance, he looks at the Old Testament law of do not murder, and he says, that's true, but I tell you, if you even insult your brother, if you even get angry at your brother and hold that against him, that's wrong. He says, even though adultery is still wrong, that's in the Old Testament, I raise the bar. If you even lust after another woman, you have committed adultery in your heart. And then he gets to eye for an eye in verse 38, and we read this: You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. So Jesus raises the bar and he says, hey, for my believers, eye for an eye isn't good enough. Even if somebody hurts you, even if you might have the opportunity to get them back, we are not called to do that. And there's a certain amount of evil which we are called to take on and not hold against people. Now, an important thing with these set of verses, they're one of the most misunderstood verses in the whole Bible. And that's this phrase, turn the other cheek. This does not apply to self-defense. This is not telling you if somebody's attacking you or your family to just sit there and turn the other cheek and get beat up. And we know this is true because of an important hint in verse 39. Let's read that again. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil, but if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Pay attention to the right cheek. We might just read over that and not notice the importance of that, but that's a very intentional detail. Think about it. If I'm a right-handed person, which most people are, how do I slap the right side of somebody's face, right? That's across from my hand. So I'm not going to slap like this. To slap somebody's right cheek, I would need to hit them with the back of my hand. Now, if I really want to hurt somebody, I'm going to punch them or maybe an open hand slap. But slapping somebody with the back of your hand is way less about hurting them. Instead, it's very insulting. And during Jesus' time, to be hit with the back of the hand was a very insulting thing to do to somebody. In fact, you could even find somebody that did that to you. So Jesus isn't saying to not ever defend yourself. What he's saying is that if somebody insults you, don't hold it against them. Maybe even if eye for an eye would allow you to sue them or fine them and get money from them, that as followers of Jesus, we're not going to hold that evil against people. Instead, we're going to choose forgiveness. And we do all of this because Jesus did this for us. Even though our punishment should be death and separation from Jesus, instead, Jesus took that on himself and does not hold our sin against us if we accept his gift of salvation. So, in the same way that Jesus does not hold our evil against us if we accept him, we should not hold the evils and sins of other people against them. And we should choose forgiveness as Jesus forgave us. Now, once we understand these three things, that eye for an eye is a limit on revenge, not encouraging it, that eye for an eye is only meant in legal situations, not relationships, and that Jesus calls us to a higher standard that even if we could get eye for an eye, that we are to not hold evil against people, we understand that these two verses are all part of the same story. There's no contradiction here. In fact, this story leads us to the salvation of Jesus that he offers us, that God does not hold our sins against us anymore if we accept the gift of Jesus. I hope this was helpful to you. Thank you for watching. God bless, and I will see you in the next video.